Hello, very good morning and welcome to Sky News Breakfast. We start with some breaking news this morning. State media in Iran has claimed that British-Iranian national Ali Reza Akbari has been executed. The former senior defence official had been accused of working for British intelligence and was sentenced to death last week. Well, let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's on the phone for us now. Alistair, really worrying reports from Iran's state media. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, and Anna, I think the first thing to say is that the reporting is coming from what's known as the Mizan news agency. Now, this news agency has close links to the Iranian judiciary. And so for that reason, I think we can take these reports as being credible and accurate, I'm afraid. And that is that Ali Reza Akbari has been executed by the Iranian regime today, as they had threatened to do. Now, just to recap over who he was and his story, he was once the former deputy defense minister in Iran, so he held a very senior position within the Iranian government, the Iranian security setup. But the Iranians charged him and accused him of spying for Britain and said that he received hundreds of thousands of pounds to give information and intelligence to Britain. He is, I should say, a dual national, a dual British-Iranian national. So he has familial links to Britain, although Iran doesn't recognise dual nationality, which made it very hard for the British government to get any kind of consular access to him whilst he was being held in prison. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, earlier this week, as the reports of his pending execution became clearer and closer, did describe this as politically motivated. The US State Department said that they would be watching Iran's actions on this very closely indeed. And there was a visit made by his family to his prison on Wednesday. They were called to the prison where they found him in solitary confinement, they said, to pay what was described as a final visit to him. On Wednesday as well, he also recorded a voice note that was broadcast on BBC Persian, and he said that he confessed to the alleged crimes against him under torture. So he said it was because he was being tortured that he made false confessions, but he always protested his innocence. He always said that he was not a spy for Britain, and despite the British attempts to persuade the Iranians not to go ahead with this, despite American pressure as well, the Iranian regime, as they have done with others linked to the ongoing protests, they have sentenced him to death and executed Ali Reza Akbari this morning.
Ali, thanks very much indeed for that. Now, England is taking the next step in ending the scourge of single-use plastic litter. After a ban on plastic stirrers, straws and cotton buds in 2020, this year will see an end to plastic plates and cutlery. To enforce the ban, the government says it's prepared to make rule breaches a criminal offence. Well, estimates suggest that we use 2.7 billion pieces of single-use cutlery in England every year, as well as 721 million single-use plates. But only 10% of this single-use plastic ends up being recycled. Becky Cottrell reports.
We're so used to seeing these in takeaway shops. Polystyrene containers have become key to grabbing food or drinks on the go. Useful and cheap, but an environmental hazard. So many single-use plastics will be banned in England from October. Businesses will have to find biodegradable alternatives like wooden cutlery or paper cups. The manager at this cafe in East London is worried about the cost at a time when they're already struggling.
Absolutely every piece of stock, everything you see, every item of food has risen in price within the last 1 year. So, this little thing, it may seem like, something small, but it's not.
The government says the public is overwhelmingly in favour of the ban, but it's a big shift for the hospitality sector in particular coming up in autumn.
We've worked very, very closely with business and industry because we obviously realise there's an impact on them, and this gives them time to use up stock that they've already got because they didn't want to just have to ditch it. That doesn't really make sense either.
The change follows similar moves in Scotland and Wales. Packaging like this, used for supermarket meals, will not be banned, but conservation charities want the government to go further, faster.
We really need to see that the plastic pollution tap turned off. What we're seeing at the moment now is essentially policies that are bailing out the bathwater, and we need to see those policies implemented in a strategic, coordinated approach across all of the nations within the UK.
The cost to the environment currently is clear. Plastic washing up on beaches or poisoning marine wildlife. But now businesses and perhaps customers will face the cost of making our waste less toxic. Becky Cottrell, Sky News.
In Ukraine, the battle for Soledar is continuing. Russia claims to have taken the small salt mining town in the east of the country, but those reports are denied by Kyiv. It would be a rare and delayed victory for President Putin's military, though much of the fighting has been carried out by mercenaries in the Wagner Group. Well, Soledar is still being pounded by artillery day and night, and Sky News has seen Ukrainian forces digging trenches there. From there, our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
The air crackles with the sound of gunfire. Ukrainian and Russian troops are engaging at close quarters. The Kremlin claims to have captured the salt mining town of Soledar, but holding it may be another matter. Units wait on standby to medevac troops. Armoured vehicles rushing along broken roads, attending to the injured. As we moved closer to the entrance of the town, we found deserted houses and abandoned animals. Both sides have taken serious casualties under the relentless barrages of artillery. Very few people have remained in this area, and as we passed destroyed homes, the bombs started falling once again.
Well, there's a lot of fighting still going on here. We've just had the sound of a shell screech overhead. Now, it's not clear exactly what's going on inside Soledar, but it seems that the Ukrainians have been pushed out and are very much on the outskirts at the moment. But the big concern is for civilians who are still trapped inside.
This terrifying war has destroyed communities, forcing millions of people from their homes. It's hard to see how they will return to these places. Further back from the front line, soldiers wait for their orders. Soledar may have fallen, but they say Russia has lost a large number of men for not much gain.
Були дуже великі втрати у них, і вони йдуть якби хвилями, наступають хвилями, якби можна сказати, по трупам один одного йдуть.
This will be the first victory over Ukrainian forces by Russia after months of military setbacks. But as Ukraine fortifies its positions, it's unlikely to make much difference to the outcome of this conflict. And in the fields of dead sunflowers, new trenches are being dug. This war of attrition is brutal and is seemingly without end. Alex Rossi, Sky News, on the outskirts of Soledar.
Hormone replacement therapy, HRT, has helped millions of women enjoy better, healthier lives. Well, now researchers claim that it could help prevent Alzheimer's disease in some women. Well, our correspondent, Siobhan Freeman-Powell, is here with me to tell me a little bit more about this. This sounds promising. So what are researchers saying?
It is really promising, especially given the fact that around 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients currently in the UK are women. So dementia is something that massively impacts women in the UK. And dementia and menopause could potentially be linked as well, because researchers looking at this study found that the high prevalence of dementia in women could potentially be linked to symptoms caused by the menopause as well. And it all links back to this gene called the APOE4 gene. It's the strongest risk factor gene for Alzheimer's, and around a quarter of women in the UK are thought to be carriers. So what these researchers from the University of East Anglia and the University of Edinburgh have been looking at is this hormone replacement therapy, which is used for the menopause. It's helped women, it helps women with symptoms of the menopause. And it found that those that had this gene that I referenced, those with this gene had better brain function when taking this hormone. And the researchers found that it was better for women that had, if they took this hormone replacement therapy early on in that perimenopause phase. So the researchers found that this HRT was actually associated with better memory, with better cognitive functions, and larger brain volumes later in life with women with this gene. So it is very promising. However, researchers are pointing out that it's not definitive. There's no direct link to say that it will definitely help women with dementia, but it is promising considering that around 900,000 people in the UK currently have dementia. This figure is expected to rise over coming years as well. And of course, it has a huge knock-on effect to our health and social care sector as well. So this is promising, but not definitive just yet.
More research needed. Interesting stuff, though, Shaman. Thanks very much indeed. Now, demonstrations against a coal mine in a condemned German village are expected to peak this weekend. Riot police have already moved in to clear protesters in Lützerath who are preventing it from being demolished. There are plans to remove the town to make way for an expanding coal mine. Well, let's get some reaction to this. I'm joined now by Louisa Neubauer, who's one of the leading activists who are currently protesting. Louisa Neubauer, very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. Explain to us why you and the other activists there are so concerned about the expansion of this mine.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's important to understand here, we're speaking of the largest single source of CO2 in the whole of Europe. That was what this coal area in the Rhineland in Germany is. So closing this down as soon as anyhow possible, it's not just a German responsibility, but it concerns people across the world because they are affected by those emissions. And what we're seeing now is that the German government made a deal with the coal company behind this, and that allows that coal company to extract far more coal than we should be able to burn to stay in line with our promises made with the Paris Agreement. Hence, we're protesting.
Yeah, and on the subject of that deal, they did a deal that allows it to expand its coal mine, but don't they then, in return, have pledged to end coal use by 2030 rather than 2038? Some might say it's a short-term hit now at a time of an energy crisis, but longer term, that's good news.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those deals that sounds too good to be true, and that is, in fact, a greenwashing deal, because the end date, 2030, so this coal exit date that was being said, doesn't mean much if the amount of coal that is being burned until then is just way too big. So what we need to do is we need to limit the amount of coal that is being burned until 2030, and that's what we're really fighting for here. And then I guess it's really important also to acknowledge that the coal under the village is not needed to secure Germany's energy supply. So what is being made up here is this crisis narrative where the government comes up to tackle a crisis, whereas the coal effectively just creates way more crises than we can ever tackle.
OK, well, let's talk about the crisis then, because, as you say, the German government say they feel they have no choice. They cite Russia's invasion of Ukraine as saying that that's prompted an energy security crisis, especially for countries like Germany that have been relying on Russian gas. They say they need this coal, or there's a risk they can't keep the lights on and they risk rolling blackouts.
Yeah, I think it's really not responsible to throw around these narratives when the reality is the coal under this specific village is not accessible to the coal company within the next 2 years. That's for logistical reasons, because it's just very deep down in the soil. So telling people that this would do anything to secure energy supply, that's bullshit, to be frank here. And then we also
sorry, I'm just going to cut in there. Apologies, Louisa. English not your first language. You're very fluent, but we can't say that this time in the morning.
Sorry.
So that's fine. I'm just going to apologise to any viewers that might be offended by that. Anyway, do continue.
This is something, that's wrong. And what we also know is that the coal that is around the village, so the coal accessible to the coal company, there's enough coal that can be burned without destructing that very village. So the numbers are quite clear there. The science is quite clear. And what we're seeing is that the German government is ignoring the science, is ignoring the voices of 700 scientists that just came out this week saying this village must stay, the coal shouldn't be touched under the ground there. And so this is in many ways very irresponsible, and also sending a signal around the world that apparently as a government in 2023, you can ignore international climate agreements, you can ignore the science, and you can ignore your responsibility to really, take climate action.
So what kind of will that action look like today? How big do you expect the protest to be? And I understand Greta Thunberg is expecting to join you as well.
Yeah, Greta is already around here, really, which is wonderful. We are seeing an overwhelming amount, like parts of society really coming up this very moment. Thousands are planning their journey up to the village just now. So we're expecting more than 10,000 people to come at least. And it's wonderful to see also farmers and churches and people from really all generations that unite here behind our common struggle for climate justice. So in a way, this is also a big moment for democracy, for civil society that says we are willing to stand up if a government doesn't draw the line and says enough is enough when it comes to destruction. It is up to us to do that.
OK, well, Louisa Neuberger, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, more than 200 flood warnings and alerts are in place across the UK as strong winds sweep rain across the country. Worst hit are Western England and Wales. Forecasters say next week could bring snow even. Well, Sky meteorologist Joe Wheeler joins me now from Lincolnshire. So, Joe, what's behind all of this cold weather heading our way?
Well, of course, we are seeing some very changeable conditions, and this all started with that big snowstorm in the States, which basically invigorated the jet stream, which started pushing all this very active weather towards us. Right at the moment, we've got low pressure system after low pressure system stacked up in the Atlantic, and that's bringing changeable conditions. But of course, as those go through, occasionally we get locked into a northerly flow, and that's pretty much what's going to happen over the next few days. So that cold air actually follows this rain today. It kind of filters in from the northwest. And then we'll see temperatures dropping, sub-zero temperatures overnight. And, of course, the risk of some wintry hazards, things like snow and ice. Certainly some coastal wintry showers we'll see over the next few days. Starting with this morning, I can say it's not yet 7:30 and I'm already on my second umbrella. The first one just gave up the ghost as I walked outside. So it's pretty blustery. I'm sort of regretting the blow dry as well. So, yes, parts of the west have seen over an inch of rain overnight, and these very strong winds gusting at times up to around 60 miles per hour. Now, it's nothing like that here, but of course it is quite blustery. So this rain is going to push its way through. Then as things dry up from the west, we'll see showers following on, and it's as those showers come in that we start to see temperatures dropping. And as such, I mean, we've got a number of warnings out, first of all for wind and rain for parts of the west, and then from tomorrow night, 1800, through to Thursday, the 19th of January, we've got this level 2 cold weather alert. And this is where around 60% of people are going to trigger that threshold that says we're going to see a prolonged period of very cold weather. So really, we're swapping these fairly mild conditions, and it is mild at the moment. This rain is bringing in temperatures of around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. But then those temperatures drop later in the day, and that cold weather is going to be with us for the next few days.
Joe, I really hope that you're able to go inside now. It does look wet and windy, and thank you so much for enduring that weather to fill us in. We just had to look at the pictures to get a sense of what it's like. Thanks very much indeed. Hello, very good morning. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Our top stories here this morning. Iran's state media say the British-Iranian man Ali Reza Akbari has been executed after being sentenced on charges of spying for Britain. Single-use plastic boxes, plates and cutlery will be banned in England from October as the government tries to tackle their devastating impact on the environment. Tensions rise as ambulance drivers say they're appalled and betrayed by ministers' attempts to remove their right to strike. State media in Iran has claimed that British-Iranian national Ali Reza Akbari has been executed. The former senior defence official had been accused of working for British intelligence and was sentenced to death last week. Well, in the last few minutes, the Prime Minister has reacted to this news. He's tweeted saying, "I'm appalled by the execution of British-Iranian citizen Ali Reza Akbari in Iran. This was a callous and cowardly act carried out by a barbaric regime with no respect for the human rights of their own people. My thoughts are with Ali Reza's friends and family." Well, James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, has said Iran has executed a British national. This barbaric act deserves condemnation in the strongest possible terms. This will not stand unchallenged. My thoughts are with Ali Reza Akbari's family. So reaction there from the British government to this news. Well, let's get more reaction now. Joining me now is Adnan Tabatabai, Chief Executive and Iran Analyst of the Middle East think tank CAPRO. A very good morning to you. First of all, your reaction to Iran's state media's announcement today.
Well, I think there has been reports and there have also been claims made in the past days that that execution has already taken place. So there was a lot of question around this case. Now it's really about what are the messages that are sent, what are the signals that are intended to be sent both internally and externally by the Iranian state. So this is what currently all questions are about.
Well, yes, and I'll come to that in just a moment. But first of all, obviously, he maintained his innocence throughout. He actually sent a voice note to BBC Persian service this week where he says he was tortured into a false confession, maintained his innocence throughout everything, as I say. But what kind of trial would he have had?
Look, it's like many cases. It would be naive to assume that no Iranian official is going to be contacted or infiltrated, or however we want to call it, by foreign agencies. But the problem obviously also is that the judiciary system in Iran is in no shape or form credible, particularly to the outside world. So it's difficult to really assess how much of it is true, how much of it was indeed forced confessions. And of course, we have to assume that when he says he was put under drugs or he was tortured to confess to things, that there is something to it. So again, this is another of, I have to say, a zillion cases where a lot of examination is needed to really find out what exactly has happened and what is really at stake.
Well, yes, and you say that Iran wants to send out a message. Expand on that a little. What do you mean?
Look, we obviously have a time with a lot of internal turmoil. We have seen executions of people that were involved in the street protests. That was supposed to send a message of deterrence for young people to no longer come out onto the streets, to show that the state will punish them with the harshest possible ways. And the case of Ali Reza Akbari, which is not a new one, apparently the legal procedures have been happening in the past years, is now also sending a message to, in fact, state actors, to political figures, that if you have done anything wrong or if you have been contacted and working with foreign agencies, this is the fate that you will have to face. So this is also a deterrence message to state actors, in fact, and to the international community, if you will, or to Britain and other countries. This is what will happen if you work with some of the members of the state elite. And I think this, intentionally or unintentionally, are the messages that are sent.
Well, yes, and a huge reaction from the British government. We saw the Prime Minister condemning this act, and James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, as well, saying Iran has executed a British national. The barbaric act deserves condemnation in the strongest possible terms. And he goes on to say this will not stand unchallenged. What do you expect next from the British government and the international community in response to this?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, cynically, this is part of the play, and this is part of what the Iranian state is expecting to see and to read by confirming that he's a British citizen. The whole issue about an Iranian official being a dual national working for a foreign agency, and then the government speaking out what they obviously have to do and condemn this execution, is part of the script. I assume that other European countries, particularly the E3, will of course chime in and condemn the execution. So we really have, unfortunately, a very cynical cycle of messages going back and forth. And unfortunately, we have to assume that more cases like this, maybe not necessarily political officials, but others that were involved in the turmoil of the past weeks and months, will unfortunately follow.
Well, Adnan Tabatabai, very interested to get your take on things. Thanks very much indeed for your response. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Now, this weekend may feel like a rare strike-free couple of days, but the bitter talks across industries continue. One ambulance workers' union has written to the Prime Minister accusing ministers of singling them out in deliberate attacks. Meanwhile, some hope in Scotland, where healthcare workers have suspended strikes in return to returning to the negotiating table. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, joins me now. So, Rob, some progress perhaps north of the border, but what about the tone of the dialogue further south?
Yeah, I think in some places in the negotiations with the Westminster government, it seems to be going into reverse. I think evidence of that overnight, a very strongly worded letter from the GMB union that represents ambulance workers that went on strike on Wednesday in England and Wales. They're very unhappy about suggestions from ministers that union officials were essentially slow to guarantee that certain staffing and services would be put in place to ensure that the most urgent ambulance call-outs actually got a prompt response. And they're unhappy that that accusation is being essentially used as part of the reason to bring in new laws to guarantee minimum service levels, essentially to force some people to work and to force a certain level of service to be provided even on strike days. Steve Rice, who's from the GMB's ambulance committee, has written a letter to Rishi Sunak. I can read you part of it. He says, "We feel utterly betrayed by the way your government has singled out ambulance workers as part of a crude attempt to remove our right to strike. You and your ministers should be ashamed of the way you have tried to paint us as uncaring about safety standards. Nothing could be further from the truth." Now, Downing Street says that it values ambulance staff and NHS workers. It's pointing to the fact that it accepted the pay recommendation for this financial year, and it said that new laws were needed to protect the public and to guarantee safety for the public on strike days. I think what you're starting to see, though, is some of the tone in which the government in Westminster has conducted these negotiations, combined with the fact that they are putting forward these new laws. Both of those things seem to be souring the ongoing discussions and potentially making a deal harder to reach. People will also potentially notice that in Scotland, negotiations between the Scottish government there and various trade unions seem to be progressing a little bit better. Strike action has been paused while those talks continue. So that potentially doesn't reflect well on the Westminster government either. I think, though, even if there was a change in tone, you really have a material problem in Westminster as well, whereby actually there are figures in the Department of Health that seem to be in a more deal-making mode now, accepting that more money needs to be put forward. The issue is the Treasury is saying that any increased pay settlement will have to come from existing budgets. So loads of difficulties, more strikes due next week in the NHS, and no deal seems at the moment to be in sight.
No, indeed. Rob, thanks very much indeed for that. Now then, let's check in on the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, after a wet start to the weekend, things will turn much colder on Sunday with an increasing risk of snow and ice. Saturday morning will be wet and windy across much of Britain, with snow over northern hills and coastal gales in the south. Overnight rain will have eased across Ireland. The rain will be heavy at times before clearing east into the North Sea and could cause further flooding issues for parts of Wales and western England. Sunshine and blustery showers will feed in from the west on strong and gusty westerly winds. The showers will turn heavy and persistent across Northern Ireland, with wind gusts here widely up to 50 miles an hour and high near the north coast. It stays windy overnight with further blustery showers, and these will be wintry over high ground. And a more persistent rain band will affect Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland, and then later Northern England. It'll turn much colder on Sunday in brisk northerly winds with a mixture of sunny spells and increasingly wintry showers of hail, sleet and snow.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to take you through the morning papers with the broadcaster and journalist Afia Hagan and writer and academic Mo Lovett. So time now to go through the morning papers. Here with me to review them are the broadcaster and journalist Afia Hagan and writer and academic Mo Lovett. So welcome back to both of you. And we're going to delve inside the papers for this hour, aren't we? And Mo, you're going to kick us off. An article you spotted inside this morning's Mirror newspaper reflecting on yesterday's growth figures, the GDP figures that came out yesterday morning.
Yeah, so a little bit of good news, I think. Looks like Britain's set to avoid an economic downturn. Figures from the economy show that it grew by 0.1%. Okay, it's quite a small amount, but it did go in the right direction, and that was in the month of November. And it was predicted to decline by 0.2%. So that seems like it's good news. And figures from the FTSE 100 also closed at a record high in that month. And the paper and several analysts are putting it down to the fact that the World Cup gave a boost to the economy, particularly the food and drink industry, which was boosted by 2.2%. So generally good news. It might mean, sadly, that there'll be pressure on the Bank of England to increase interest rates, which might not suit mortgage owners like myself. But generally, it's quite good news. It's a short blip, I think, in a kind of longer term picture, which is a little bit more gloomy. So I think, there's no need to rest on our laurels. We really do need to kind of look at how we increase productivity in the UK economy. But certainly it's meant that we've avoided that kind of technical definition of a recession going into a fall over 2 consecutive quarters. A little bit of good news.
Well, yeah, that's right. And all eyes on whether or not inflation will come down, because that seems to be one of the big problems, doesn't it? So we'll keep an eye on that. In the meantime, Afia, you wanted to turn to a double-page spread with some pretty shocking pictures in the Mirror.
Yes, that's right. So this is an investigation in the Daily Mirror by their environment correspondent, and this is about someone who lives in Essex who goes on these hunting holidays, essentially to South Africa, where he's seen killing lions, as you can see here, zebras, bears, and other parts of the world for sport. And he's defending shooting these wild animals and endangered species, I might add, for fun, saying that he's playing a role in the environment and also protecting these animals from poachers, even though he's probably doing the same thing that poachers do. You're killing the animals, poachers kill them for tusks, for other bits of the body. He's killing them for fun. He's trying to defend this by saying that he does it in a more humane way and comparing it to the way that animals are slaughtered in the United Kingdom. But the problem here is that he's going on hunting holidays for fun to kill endangered species like lions, giraffes, and rhinos in South Africa. Now, he has a license, so he's saying that British and American authorities don't need to get involved. But the point is that these are endangered species, and you're going to whole other continent, a whole other country to shoot them for fun. And I don't think this would be allowed if you were, shooting the neighbour's dogs or cats or something like that. So why is it allowed that he's allowed to go to South Africa and kill endangered species and post these pictures on social media for fun?
Yeah, and as you say, a pretty robust defence of what he's doing there in the paper as well. Let's move on to a totally different issue, Mo. You've picked out an article here in the Daily Star, which talks about what Gary Lineker said about MPs' pay.
Yes, it's just caught my eye a little bit. Gary Lineker is saying that we need to increase MPs' salary to get smarter people to do a better job, and that we don't entice the best minds. And I think what he's doing here is tapping into a kind of general feeling of disillusionment with our political class at the moment. I just think he's going about it the wrong way. And he's certainly been highly criticised for his comments on social media. I mean, maybe for, if you're earning 1.35 million, salary, MP salary doesn't look that great. But I think most of us think 84k a year and rising to 100k if you're a minister isn't a bad salary. But I think part of the problem is that we have this kind of political class that are career politicians. Actually, I'd like to see more politicians who are kind of motivated by a sense of duty and wanting to make the world or the country a better place. I think it's those career politicians and the idea that it's a way to earn a living is probably part of the problem. We talked about Wes Streeting in the first round of the papers, and there's a guy who's really motivated to make some improvements. And it's not just on the Labour bench, so I'm not being party political here, but those are the politicians that we want. The people that have a sense of duty and want to make the country a better place for their constituents. And I don't really think salary is the answer there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, interesting. And whereas some people say higher salary, you might get the best brains in the country, more tempted into politics rather than to other industries where they can pay more. So it's quite an interesting debate, isn't it? Let's turn to royal issues. Feels like ages since we talked about Prince Harry, but there is a double-page spread here. Still plenty of coverage, isn't there, around? In fact, it's on some of the front pages again. This is the Express's double-page spread. And Afia, tell us what it's telling us.
Well, yes, the Daily Express have conducted a poll in which they talked about the popularity of different members of the royal family after the release of Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. And it says here that popularity of King Charles III has actually gone up 10% after the release of the book, but the Queen Consort Camilla, her popularity has gone down by 2%. Now, the Prince of Wales and the Prince and Princess of Wales have fared a bit better. Their popularity has gone up for the Prince of Wales at 5% and up for the Princess of Wales 9%. But for Prince Harry himself, his popularity has dipped by 39%, and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, her popularity has dipped by 35%. So it seems that after the release of Spare, more people are finding sympathy with the royal family, with King Charles, especially, rather than Prince Harry himself. Now, in terms of whether people think that Prince William and Prince Harry will ever heal their rift, most people thought that actually they would. 9% thought they would heal their rift quite soon, but 35% said yes, but not in the short term. Now, the conversation around Meghan and Harry being stripped of their titles has been one that's been around for a long time, and this poll says that people thought that 54% of them thought that, yes, they should be stripped of their roles, stripped of their titles, of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and 31% of people thought that they should attend the coronation, and 44% of people thought that they should stay away. So lots of varying opinions there coming out after the release of Spare this week.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's had something to say about it, haven't they? There's been so many opinions, and I'd be really curious to see what results you get to a similar poll in America, for example, whether or not they're viewed more sympathetically there. The suggestion is that Harry and Meghan are more popular there. Anyway, let's try and get another story in, Mo. This is inside The Guardian, and this is the new AI chatbot that is causing a few concerns, especially in schools and universities.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called ChatGPT, and it's an app that can create essays and stories and even kind of help you write your job application. It comes out of Elon Musk's OpenAI research laboratory. And basically what you do, the AI is fed lots and lots of words, and then it comes out with sentences based on probability of usage, a bit like predictive texting on your phone. But the concern within universities is that students will use it to write their essays and not learn the skill of writing essays. And so one university even scrapped essay writing as a method of assessment in grading students. I think they're jumping the gun a little bit quickly there. I mean, good essay, the art of a good essay is in structure and creativity. And I'm not sure AI is quite ready to replicate that. There's other people saying, this actually could be a good thing. If the world of industry is going to use AI in this way, why shouldn't students get to grips with it? I suppose it's that old thing that new technology can be used for good purposes or bad purposes, depending on its user.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we're all just rushing to catch up, well, I am anyway, with what technology is out there and its implications. Very briefly, Afia, a story about a lucky student at a gig. Fill us in very briefly.
Yeah, so this is a student at a college in Glasgow who has just got the opportunity to support Louis Capaldi on tour when he's playing at the OVO Hydro in Glasgow in front of 12,000 people.
Wow.
This is a student who goes to the new college in Lanark. She was asked by her lecturer if she was free on the 24th of January, I think it was. She said yes, and now she's supporting Lewis Capaldi. Good
Amazing. She said she thought it was a joke at the time, didn't she? Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
We're all out of time. See you again next hour. Thank you.